All right. Well, welcome in everyone, and thank you guys for joining us today as we dive into Minnesota's adult use cannabis program. This session is targeted towards the newly awarded provisional licensees and those awaiting award, and we'll be walking through some actionable strategies to help your business get up and running for long-term success. And so just a bit of housekeeping as we get started. We will have a Q&A section or Q&A session available at the end for all attendees. If you do prefer to remain anonymous, there's a toggle option when you submit your question. Feel free to submit questions at any time during the webinar. And as we get to the end, we'll circle back on those and answer those at the end. So our agenda for today, first we're going to meet our speakers. We got a really great group of people here today from different facets of the industry. We'll take a quick look and update on the cannabis program in Minnesota. We'll be diving into how we kind of navigate real estate and zoning for cannabis businesses, as well as designing those facilities for compliance and efficiency. We'll also be speaking on banking, payment, and cash flow management of new operations. As well as integrating in some of the right technology with some of these new facilities, and as well as how to build your brand, go to market, and then just preparing for operational readiness and all the things that you need to have in place. And then throughout the course of this, as you're meeting speakers, a lot of these would have the potential to be a strategic partner to you as you do move through and you identify some of those weaknesses or gaps that you guys might have as you're getting started. So as a kickoff, I'd like everybody just kind of go around, give your name, your title, and the organization you're with, and then we'll dive into some of the meat of this. So Walker, if you'd lead us out.
Yeah, of course. My name is Walker Tickle. I am the director of startup services at HYC, kind of spearheading all efforts for new startup companies and businesses entering the cannabis space. So thanks for joining us today.
Great. Thanks, Walker. Shannon?
Hey, everyone. I'm Shannon Bustos. I bring 15 years of experience in the cannabis industry. For the past 6 years, I've been with Higher Yields Consulting as the Director of Real Estate, specializing in helping clients identify, acquire, and develop compliant properties that align with both business goals and regulatory framework.
Thanks, Shannon. Tom? You're on mute, Tom.
Well, that's perfect because I started off saying the wrong thing anyway. I said good morning. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tom Wagner. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Higher Yield Consulting. And so my responsibilities here are around delivery excellence and from a project execution and delivery perspective for Higher Yields. We take that very serious, and that's my role.
Great. Thanks, Tom. How about you, Sammy?
Hi, I'm Sammy Murdoch. I'm with Herring Bank, and I'm the strategic channel partner, relationship manager, and business development manager, mainly focusing on our payments and our cannabis banking products.
Awesome. Thanks, Sammy. Riley?
Hey guys, I'm Riley, co-founder of Summit Pay. We are a software provider that specializes in account receivable platforms and digital payments for cannabis providers.
Great. Scott?
Hi, my name's Scott Higa. I'm a principal at G3 Architecture. We help you from the initial concept of a project through to construction and construction administration.
Great. Thanks, Scott. And Matt? Is Matt on today, Scott?
Yeah, I think he may be on mute, actually.
Hey, Matt, we'll circle back to you. But Matt is with G3 Architecture as well, and he's a project manager. And then Quentin?
Hi, Quentin Kruger. I'm with BudScout AI. I'm the founder of the company. I'm a subject matter expert in operational efficiency, data, and analytics.
Awesome. Michael?
Hey guys, I'm Michael Walters. I'm the director of marketing with HYC. I've been in the cannabis industry about 10 years, helping brands scale and grow primarily through digital marketing and SEO. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Thanks, Michael. And Eric.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Eric Robertson. I'm general manager at Lake Leaf Cultivation. We're a vertically integrated company, so I'm kind of responsible from things from cultivation all the way down to retail.
Awesome. Thanks, Eric. Great. Just a quick congratulations to everyone who was selected for the provisional licenses in the June 5th lottery. Really big milestone for you guys, and we're excited to see this program starting to move forward and really starting to build some momentum. According to the data that was released by the state, 50 cultivator licenses are going to be issued, 100 meso business licenses, 75 social equity retail licenses. In addition, 473 micro businesses have been preliminary approved, with 534 still under review. The Office of Cannabis Management has also announced that the next lottery is going to be on July 22nd, covering the remaining social equity retail licenses as well as the general license applicants. So again, really exciting time for Minnesota and the cannabis industry there. And this is a kind of a process map provided by the Minnesota Office of Cannabis Management. As of now, if you were selected, whether through a capped or on-capped license, you should be in the process of completing your background check and submitting your labor peace agreement to the OCM. These are all prerequisites before moving on to the next steps, which include the final submissions, the site registration, and obtaining local government approval. Each of these licenses is going to have up to 18 months to secure a location, submit finalized operational documentation to the OCM, which includes your site details, and receive approval from your local jurisdiction for zoning and other municipal requirements, all of this leading up to your final commencement inspection. It is important to note that this roadmap was created by the OCM to help ensure you're meeting all the legal requirements, but there are also additional areas we'll be discussing today, both aligned with this roadmap and beyond. And to really start to help you start thinking holistically about your business and all of the things that are going to need to happen over these up to 18 months to be able to get you to operation and be able to get you to market. And so our goal here today is not just to help you kind of understand what that path looks like for compliance, but also operational preparation to get ready for day one success.
All right. Thanks, Corey, for kind of setting the foundation here. And so what we're going to spend a lot of time discussing today is this road to operationalization. I teased Corey in the group a little bit. I said, "Oh, you made that word up," but they didn't. It's actually a real word. So there's more to it than just licensing, and there's just a ton of work that has to be done, and everybody needs to kind of understand what that roadmap looks like. And as we go through today, we're going to dive into each of these 4 specific areas to a greater detail than this slide. So, obviously we've got the regulatory support. So you've got your preliminary approvals. There's some supplemental application submissions that have to be done. You have to provide some updated plans. It's in this time frame here that you start working on your standard operating procedures. You're preparing for compliance auditing and making sure that the property fits everywhere. And so there's this whole property identification. We're going to dive down into that. And I know that Shannon's going to spend some time with this group talking about different property issues in green zone assessments and things like that. But once you have that, chances are, since this is all new, you're not going to find a facility that's ready to grow cannabis. You're not going to find one that's ready to sell cannabis. And so you're going to have to do some work there, and you need some design work that's going to need to be done from an architectural perspective, architectural engineering, your infrastructure, which is called MEP. So mechanical, electrical, and plumbing from an engineering perspective. You might even get into some civil engineering requirements depending on your site and what you're doing. But with all of that, you need project management, and then from a design perspective, you have to understand what is the system. And this is even on a retail perspective, there are so many different elements that need to be considered. You have to look at it from a system perspective because everything needs to work together. And once you have all of that stuff ready to go, you have the plan in place. The next stage is construction management, right? So now you have this project management that has to take place while you're doing either the rehab or the new build. There's the procurement activities and understanding who the suppliers are and how you have to get payments to the suppliers, what the timelines look like, and then how you communicate with your vendors and your suppliers. And then all of the permitting and approval oversight that has to take place. So as we've gone down this roadmap, there's those first three. We went from month 1 all the way up to potentially month 16. And then in the end, you got this system startup. So you can expect this to happen anywhere between months 12 and 24. But this is where you have to make sure that your workflows have been created. You have a fully developed organizational chart. You've done your staffing, you've done your training, you've completed your SOPs, right? So this process creation, you've implemented these things, and you have this active compliance auditing plan. And so in all of these areas, we will dive into these topics throughout this webinar. So put your boots on and get ready to go. This is what it takes.
Awesome. Thanks, Tom. And given that the Minnesota OCM's established an 18-month deadline, it's extremely important that you're able to stay on track, especially without cutting corners and meeting timelines, and really being ready for that commencement inspection. Are there any pitfalls here, Tom? I mean, in these 4 areas that you're aware of or that you've seen in your experience where businesses have got a little bit behind and would maybe delay them from being able to hit that 18-month timeline?
Yeah, I think when you look at it from an 18-month timeline, the engineering is absolutely crucial. But that can't be done until you have the right property, right? You can get hung up if you think you've found the right property and you haven't coordinated with the local governments. They can put a stop to it and really delay you. And I know Shannon's going to share some information on that. But then it just kind of gets into the design work. You can't really just think that you can continue moving forward because you have a plan in your head. You have to submit this information and it has to go through the approval process. And if you don't have it done correctly, if you don't have the right engineering drawings, you're going to get stuck, right? They're gonna hold you up. But I think that the number one thing that causes failure is the lack of project management, right? Having that oversight that's in place, that is, paying very close attention to every task, making sure that what's called critical path management is in place, and that there's doing a lot of active risk and issue management as you move forward and you go through the life cycle. So I think that's probably the most critical thing that people overlook. They assume that somebody else is doing it, and what they find out is nobody is doing it. Nobody did talk to the local government. The engineering drawings aren't stamped because they don't have any. They did them on a napkin, and it's not acceptable. So, with that, those 3 areas I think are the key areas in my mind to get within that 18 months.
Got it. Thanks, Tom. Well, let's shift into one of the earliest and often one of the trickiest parts of getting started, and that's the real estate and zoning. Just because you've got a license doesn't mean that your site's automatically going to be good to go. Local control plays a huge role here in Minnesota, depending on where you're at. And so, Shannon, a question I have for you is, what are the key factors operators should prioritize when evaluating potential properties for long-term viability?
Well, it's really to get into the property. First off, you got to make sure zoning is compliant, your buffer zones are checked off, you're far enough away from schools, parks, churches, all of that stuff. But then also within it, depending on your license type, if you're retail, you still need to make sure your property is within retail friendly area, high traffic. So, with cannabis, there's a lot of aspects. It's not just, where these properties can go, but you still want a property that's going to, be a benefit to your type of type of license and business.
Got it. And then in your, I think you said 15 years experience, what lessons have you learned in working with clients navigating some of the zoning for cannabis? And what's something that maybe you'd share with a new license holder?
I would say, timing, those government officials, you want to make them your best friend. The easier you make their job, the easier you're going to obviously get, pass through a lot of this stuff. But really going through your due diligence, making sure you're zoning compatible. And even if you are within a right zone, you got to make sure that you don't need a special use permit. If you do, a lot of these municipalities that takes up to 6 months. So, making sure you're within those required buffer zones. So then, down the road, you don't, get hung up on some due diligence oversight.
Got it. And I would think, something that I've seen over the years is, especially on the cultivation side, is sometimes what you're looking for. There's the compliance side of it, of making sure that it's compliantly located. But when you get into that property, it's not necessarily what's inside those four walls. It's a lot of the infrastructure that comes with it. Because a lot of these cultivations, they pull quite a bit of power. Sometimes you have to upgrade sewage, plumbing, and there's a lot of work, and even upgrading power sometimes can take quite a bit of time, depending on where you are and how much power you're trying to pull. So I've seen a lot of that on my side as a pitfall, but I'm curious from you, what are some other pitfalls that you think cannabis operators may face here in Minnesota?
Probably, that's a really good point on the cultivation side of it. Also looking into, how much is it going to cost to retrofit a lot of these properties? A lot of these properties within green zones, they're not necessarily, it's not size, right? You might have a smaller size, you might have a larger size. So just really evaluating and doing your due diligence, not only from the zoning aspect and if the property works, but also, what is your budget going to be when you get into this property, and also making sure you have contingencies all the way through, right? Especially if you have a lease. If you have a lease, you want to make it contingent on getting all your zoning verifications and your setback requirements. So I've seen a lot of that happen where, you get into a lease and you don't make some contingencies in there, and nobody wants to be stuck with the, 5-year lease where you can't put your license.
Awesome. Yeah, and that's a really good point. What are maybe just some tips that you can walk through of like how to kind of set those contingencies up, or contingency agreements that you've seen go the right way, maybe some that you've seen go the wrong way?
Yeah, especially if it's a lease, but even if it's a purchase, right, you want to make it fully contingent on not just your zoning and making sure that's compatible, but you want to make sure you put contingencies within there to go through inspections on the property, as well as getting it fully licensed. I know some of these municipalities you need to have public hearings. So you don't want to get to the public hearing and then for whatever reason, your license can't be held at that location anymore. You want to make sure you put a contingency in there to where if your license isn't awarded at that location, then you can cancel out of the lease or the purchase agreement.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really great insight there. So jumping into facility design, which is a lot more than just layouts and aesthetics. As Tom mentioned, and even Shannon was kind of touching on a little bit, the design portion of these can get very complex very quickly. And when these things get complex and timelines aren't adequately being hit, sometimes it causes some pretty major delays. And those delays, essentially, time is money, so they do cost money. So for cannabis operators, design impacts everything from compliance to efficiency, as well as long term. If you're starting small and planning on growing larger, how you kind of put that scalable plan in place. And so I guess a couple questions I have for you, Scott and Matt, is how do you approach balancing compliance requirements with operational efficiency when designing cannabis facilities?
Yeah, Corey, that's a very good question. A lot of it is in the due diligence. I think when operators are considering their program, what is their program and how does that relate to building design? If you're going to look at a remodel situation versus new build, uh, that kind of timeline is completely different. Um, there are things that really need to be considered at the very beginning from a jurisdictional perspective, and that is the requirements to get electrical service upgrade. Should should this be a new build? If it's a remodel, is the power for that building sufficient? From a physical building perspective, on the grow and cultivation side, there's a lot of power involved in a building because of cooling. And if you're going to cool a building, you need to have a roof that supports it. So that's one thing that really needs to be looked at is power and structure from a remodel perspective. If you're going to do a new building, and as Corey mentioned earlier, there's civil engineering. How does the building sit on the site? There's a planning process that you have to go through that could be quite long, depending on what the jurisdiction is and what it requires. So those are the kinds of things that I think we certainly see from a compliance perspective at the beginnings of the project. I will say from a broader perspective too, energy compliance is really a large issue now that we have to look at early in the project, whether it's a remodel or it's a new build. So that is in addition to what the building program may be.
Got it. And then, what kind of design elements can help kind of future-proof a facility as regulations or business needs might change?
Yeah, I think it really revolves around power, Corey. When a building is designed, we have to design for the tasks at hand. We generally will build and design a transformer to provide power for that task. But if there are future phases involved, it's probably a good idea to oversize a building transformer and then look at the electrical switchgear so you can add sections of new switchgear over time should the building or the program grow. So that's really one thing that should be looked at the very beginning is the power environment and working with the local authority. One other thing that involves a timeline is equipment purchasing from a core and shell perspective. Often it takes a year to get power to a building. And because of the cooling components with things like grow and cultivation facilities, there are a lot of HVAC units involved, and those are long lead times as well. So it's good to get a grasp on what your program is so you can start to think about the power environment for your building and what you may want to do in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you touched on something to it. It falls a little bit outside of maybe the architecture side, but a big part of design is really sizing the facility properly
Yes.
for what you're trying to do, right?
Yes.
I think we've all seen some facilities that were kind of overbuilt. I think we've seen some that were underbuilt, built both on the retail side as well as cultivation and manufacturing. So that seems like a very big step to make sure that you get your footing properly before you start moving towards actually designing this. But what are maybe some other common design mistakes that you've seen in cannabis facilities that Minnesota operators could look to avoid?
Yeah, it really revolves around power and cooling, Corey. I would say from a site perspective, kind of going back to that question though, before we leave that question, uh, if there's a need to think about future phases or growing the business, you want to make sure that your site is large enough to grow the building beyond what your initial purposes are. And that also involves truck turning. You have to get trucks into the site, they have to be able to load and then leave. But if you're going to enlarge the building later, how does that affect your property boundaries and the way you park the building? So those are some things that you should look at, certainly from a site perspective.
Great.
Yeah, and then back to the building. It really is about power and cooling. We do have requirements for domestic water, for fire sprinklers. That's another thing that should be looked at early is water pressure to a site. Is there sufficient pressure to allow for domestic water and fire sprinkler systems for the building, for the use, and should you enlarge your building later on?
Yeah. And I mean, with all the light, with all the power that's needed, the HVAC, I mean, energy efficiency is extremely important. So how do you guys kind of work to integrate in some of the sustainability and energy efficiency, or opportunities for efficiency?
Yeah, with energy codes today, we do have to comply with the envelope of the building. So the building has to, the walls, floors, roof plane have to be properly insulated. Typically, these types of uses won't have a lot of openings, doors and windows. So it really, that helps from an energy perspective. And then from an equipment perspective, we really do, and I think this is something that's just an ongoing advancement in equipment is becoming much more energy efficient, both from a power perspective and the way it gives off heat. But those are all things that we have to look at is how to cool a space, how to ventilate a space, and how to keep it dry.
Got it. And then, Walker, just to kind of pull you in on the startup services side, like how might SOPs align, or better align with the design work that Scott's team does?
Yeah, it's a real important aspect to have fully comprehensive, well built out SOPs. First and foremost, you want to be specific to the rules and regulations set forth by the OCM, local ordinances, specific to your license type. But to your question, it's also built out to your facility, your operations, your methodologies to kind of coincide with the facilities build out, the layout, methodologies, security, things of that nature. So, kind of generally speaking, you need a standard set of SOPs, but you have to take the time to really build them out specific to your operations that meet, whether it be the square footage, your tiered racking systems, specific things that you kind of have to account for on a daily basis. So, really customizing specific to your operations and your facility is pretty key.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott. Thank you, Walker.
You.
So the next part, this is everybody's favorite, getting paid. So one of the biggest challenges though in cannabis, so areas for new cannabis operators when they're planning to start up their business is banking and payment solutions. Even with a licensing in hand, securing compliant financial services isn't always straightforward and easy, especially in new emerging markets like Minnesota. And so, Sammy, I was hoping you could give us your thoughts on what cannabis-friendly banking services are currently available in Minnesota, and how operators can best prepare themselves to be onboarded by a cannabis banking partner.
Okay, thanks, Corey. Yes, so Herring, we're a 125-year-old bank, Texas-based, but we've been banking the cannabis space since 2012. So we've definitely got a lot of experience in this space. We can offer direct deposit accounts for anybody in the cannabis space. And we want those to feel like a regular bank account with some extra due diligence and compliance standards. Obviously we have to do that, but with those, just as a regular account, you would have debit cards for the signers on the account, checks, access to ACHs, wires, online banking, mobile deposit, bill pay. We do have new capabilities where we have about 4,000 ATMs nationwide right now that will accept cash payments as well. So if there is an ATM in your area that is set up to accept cash payments that's in the Herring network, then you can just make those deposits directly into the ATM. So that definitely helps on that. We have courier relationships. And then we do some in the leasing and cannabis lending space as well.
Great. And so how can you kind of walk me through what the process is for some of kind of that onboarding and due diligence that's done on operators, and how they can kind of when they would need to reach out to you guys, and what that process would look like?
So I think that they can, I think that them gaining the knowledge up front is probably the best thing. So even if they know that there are ways out, I'm happy to have those conversations with them and kind of give them an overview. But we, have the initial conversations. Once we make certain it's a good fit, it goes through an onboarding process through a portal. We collect, your general organizational docs, licensing. With this, we would just need with everybody being pre-operational, we would need a copy of the application. But we can set these up to where you can actually function through these accounts without having a full license yet. So they can do their build out and everything to keep track of everything, keep everything transparent. And we'll definitely work with them on discounted rates and things like that to get them up and going. So once we start that process, it really should not take, if they have all of the correct documentation and everything we need, I would say that we could, get those things opened within a few days.
Awesome. And then Riley, a major issue that we've been dealing with in the industry since the beginning is really just payment processing and trying to be a more legitimate industry that doesn't just operate in cash. But there've definitely been some roadblocks along the way, and some pretty major issues that have impacted businesses in a negative way. But I'm interested, based on what you guys have worked on and where you guys are in the payment processing solutions world, what is the most viable option, or what are the viable options for cannabis retailers and cannabis operators right now?
Yeah, so on the cannabis retailer front, right, you have a lot of cashless ATMs, like Sammy mentioned, which by far the best options out there. There are some people offering wallets that you can pay into a wallet to get paid out, but I would always advise that you talk to us or Sammy about getting a cashless ATM set up if you want somebody for the retailer spot. For us with our software, what's Sammy?
I'm so sorry. So what I was talking about was on the deposit side. So you could deposit money into your account, cash into your account with those ATMs. So as far as a retailer using cashless ATMs, there are definitely some things that there's a lot of active lawsuits on those right now. And so I would definitely, make certain that you're fully aware of some of the risk on that. So I'm sorry to interrupt you, Riley. I just wanted to clarify that.
Look, they're very difficult regulatory wise, right? So they're limited, still very cash heavy in the front end, but where our software and where we come in is a lot on the B2B operator side. And so in that market, right, we don't have credit cards available yet, but we do have automated clearinghouse. And so a lot of our B2B manufacturers, cultivators, suppliers, wholesalers are still relying on, hey, send me a check, send us cash, or go to your bank and push the wire to us. But now our solution allows you to integrate a software into your ERP or accounting software and have your customers pay you just from the invoice, which in normal business sounds very very basic. But in the cannabis space, what we've seen is a lot of the legacy markets have very struggled with account receivables, because that's not been the case. Now, where our software, SummitPay, comes in is allowing you to send invoices out like a normal business. Your customer is able to pay straight from the invoice, and the funds are deposited to you in the bank account, right? So it's an easier experience for you because you're receiving funds faster and more compliant, and your customers are also benefiting from easily being able to pay you.
Got it. And so it seems like I hit on it, Sammy hit on it a little bit, but like, what trends I guess you guys see in how operators manage cash flow and the risks that the kind of the payment risks that they sometimes experience in emerging markets?
Yeah, I can go. What I am seeing on my end from a lot of our clients that we come in is they're carrying close to 20% account receivable of their book, right? So they're holding massive liabilities outstanding, frankly, because they don't have the systems in place when they start to properly account for and get their income, right? And so they're often having to chase down retailers or vendors for their money. And so they're carrying those liabilities, and then they're having to be stretched very thin. I'm sure Sammy has seen that a lot too.
Absolutely. And I will say that out of all of the platforms that I've seen, we get multiple calls to look at platforms, but SummitPay has been very, very robust. I mean, it's a very impressive platform. And so I think that Riley's talking more B2B, and then we're talking more on the retail side for the customer purchasing cannabis. And so, Visa and MasterCard have very hard rules against that. And so we do have a merchant processing platform coming out. As we're the bank, we're the processor, and we own our own gateway. So we cannot operate in the gray. There's so many of these merchant processing platforms out there that are very, very fragile and run the risk of getting shut down because they are workarounds. Everybody's doing the best they can in the space, but there are definitely risks. And so we're really trying to fill that gap in the space so they have a reliable payment source that is not going to get shut down because it is compliant.
Yeah. And I've been in the industry since 2008, and I can tell you the early years, nothing was worse than having someone come in and sell me on an idea of how I would be able to take credit cards or take debit cards and be able to operate that way, set my business up to function that way, and then find out one day that I just can't do it out of the blue. It really puts a wrench in things and can have just a major, major impact on the operation. So kind of back to more of a regulatory side, compliance side, what do new licensees need to know about reporting requirements and banking compliance to avoid some of these kind of common issues?
So we really try to keep everything, obviously you're always going to have your compliance standards. We try to keep that as simple as possible for the customer. But what we really want our customers to do is to reach out and ask questions. Every account has an analyst that's assigned to it, and they can reach out if they have any, questions on any sort of transaction, the best way to do it, just full transparency and asking lots of questions. That's what we're here for. Obviously, everybody on this call is new to the space, and we want to definitely be there to support you and get you through this as easily as possible, because there's always going to be hoops to jump through. But we have really tried to simplify that as much as possible and remain, with the gold standard of compliance.
Awesome. Yeah, having good partners in the payment processing area and banking is extremely important, and not just to get people set up, but also to have there to kind of work through some of those issues as things come up. And we've always had really good success with both you guys at Herring and Riley, you guys over at SummitPay. So thank you guys.
Thank you, Corey.
And then so next part's jumping into equipment and technology. A key part of building out a compliant and efficient operation, whether it's cultivation, retail, manufacturing, having the right tools in place early can make a huge difference in yield, cost control, and really long-term scalability. And so Quentin, you guys have the Bud Scout tool, and have you worked on some retail tools as well? But can you give us a little bit about how can AI-driven tools like Bud Scout improve operational efficiency for cultivators and retailers?
Yeah, thanks, Corey. Again, just background talking about operations and cultivation. I've supported in kind of a consulting role in the EU and the US, both domestically and at Puerto Rico. And some of the observations we saw early on in the cannabis industry, some of the lessons learned, was a severe lack of data and issues dealing with labor. As I think people in the Minnesota market will find out that labor will be in high demand. It'll be very expensive to train, and it'll be even more expensive to retain. So part of what we have done at Bud Scout AI is to be able to build robotic scouts that can go over the individual benches and racks and help score your labor to make sure that they're trimming the plants correctly, that they're not damaging the plants. New technologies such as artificial intelligence, particularly machine learning, can look for pests, can look for bugs. In the case of our company, we can also identify plant stress up to 14 days before humans can see it. So one of the things I would encourage new Minnesota growers, because everybody goes through this, I've seen it in my experience, is as you are refining your grow or getting your grow kicked off, be thinking about the technologies, be thinking about the data that you think you will need to be successful. Data is very often overlooked, where we end up tweaking all sorts of levers to get our grow working right, but we don't have a comprehensive data record to go back and say, what did I change or what should I change? And can I learn from my previous mistakes? So I really see data and AI in the cultivation space as really taking over in the next few years.
Got it. Yeah, it's a really cool and interesting tool that you guys have. What types of equipment integrations are needed for kind of the optimal use of AI in the Bud Scout platform?
So for right now, I mean, out of the gate, as people are thinking about facility planning, be it new facility or retrofitting, obviously everyone was going to have HVAC technologies. You're probably going to have sensors to monitor your CO2, your temperature in a room. You'll probably have some handheld light meters to be measuring PAR. You'll probably be measuring VPD. What we look at Bud Scout is being able to provide that same sensing, but think of us like a CT scanner. Every centimeter, we're going down a bench, providing detailed information about the individual plants and the individual rows. And then we will work with other companies, like Rhythm or some of the big providers that are doing room level environmentals and starting to interface that data together. So you have the ability to make changes. It's one thing to tell you this side of the room is too hot or too cold, or this side of the room doesn't have good flow for CO2. But the big piece here is you got to be able to be actionable on the data we're getting. So for us, we look forward to doing more integrations with different equipment vendors. And for us to get started in facilities, we only really need a Wi-Fi connection. So we provide interfaces and we provide that ingestion point for all the data to come in to kind of give you one-stop UI interface of what's happening in your room.
Got it. And so it's really cool tool. It's been engineered specifically for cultivators and really to help them kind of from an operational standpoint, be as efficient as possible, help kind of steer their genetics. But also it seems like Bud Scout contributes to kind of energy efficiency and sustainability. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, again, for new growers that have facilities, 1,000 square feet or less, we can use Bud Scout to start assessing, say, the genetics, doing some pheno hunting, starting to get a capture, creating profiles of your plants, as well as for larger facilities where it's tougher to hire that labor. And then that kind of goes into your question, Corey, about energy efficiency and sustainability. One of the unique things about our robots is we use rechargeable batteries that can be powered low voltage DC. So think of like your outdoor patio lights that we can easily attach to a solar panel, which could easily power the robots. But one of the big things that customers have asked us for is, especially in states like California, and I imagine Minnesota will be similar in terms of energy regulation. Just a fun fact for the audience here, about 1% of the nation's power grid is currently spent on powering lights to grow cannabis indoors in controlled environments. So we have the ability to kind of monitor, should the lights be on, have the plants taken in enough photons, have we gotten the absorption for the day, should we target and shut off certain lights? We now have that ability with data and robotics, and as well as things like fertigation, looking at nutrient feeding and water. We can also look at the plants through the invisible light spectrum and be able to tell, has this plant got the nutrients it needs for the day? If so, we're being inefficient with overwatering, or even maybe we're underwatering. So I very much look forward to, I said, this very data-enabled world where in Minnesota, we have a real opportunity to be energy efficient and sustainable and set a gold standard for our cannabis market relative to the other cannabis markets in the country.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so Bud Scout's able to kind of go in and identify, some of these issues within a room or within the facility. But Scott, when you guys are designing these things from the beginning, what are some of the key considerations you guys look at for airflow design in the cultivation rooms to make sure that there's as much of an even distribution from the beginning of temperature and humidity and CO2?
Yeah, we really look at the equipment, the lighting, and see what kind of heat gain is going to occur in rooms, and then we have to balance that with dehumidification through the duct work. So it's kind of taking a look at the broad picture of how these rooms are organized. And then within each room, what is the microclimate that needs to be delivered? And then there's a control system that will interlock with the building mechanical electrical system to make sure there's optimization occurring in all of the rooms. In a larger facility, I would add too that there are different uses in the room, and so the heating and cooling requirements of a cultivation room, let's say, are far different than rooms where you're cutting product or you're delivering product or have offices. So there are many different climates within the same building that need to be optimized from a HVAC perspective.
Well, a comment I would add to that, Scott, too, if I may, is especially in climates like Minnesota, I've seen this similar when the Michigan markets and the Illinois markets went live. For those of you that aren't growing in fully controlled environments, but have greenhouses or hoop house type grows, seasonality becomes very important. So designing that facility correctly for proper airflow and temperature and humidity control, again, all the more reason why you want to be collecting data.
Yes, there's high humidity environments regionally that can certainly affect the way a system will work. It's a very good point.
Yeah, and I feel like over the last 15, 16 years, these things have gotten a lot more advanced, especially in the design part of this, because in the early years, it was just about hanging lights, getting some HVAC and water and plants. But it's become a lot more sophisticated than that. When we're going through the design process now, we need to know exactly how many plants are going to be in the room, how much water is going to be going through the room, how much water needs to be taken out of the room, even plant sizing, and when events, plant maintenance, and things like that are happening, because all of that equipment, none of it was engineered to necessarily work with other pieces of it. So how all that equipment's engineered to work together to make sure, one, that it is working together, but also two, that there's not redundancy that's creating inefficiencies in those spaces, because we've seen a lot of that too, where we've got dehumidifiers kind of fighting HVAC systems.
Yes.
Is that how do you kind of thinking about that and thinking about the growers, how might the size of a facility, whether it's ceiling heights or the shapes of the rooms, or it's a new build or it's a retrofit, how does that kind of determine or put you guys down a path of making certain recommendations around the type of system or the type of equipment to put into a cultivation site?
Yeah, so it kind of begins, Corey, with the racking system. What is the spacing of the racking? How tall is the racking? And that kind of sets the ceiling height. Typically we start at 12 or 13 feet, which then has to engage a lighting system, and then above the ceiling, but below the structure would be ductwork. And the size of the ductwork, that is heating and cooling and dehumidifying the space, can vary depending on what that particular room's requirements are. Again, very different in a cultivation room than see an area where you're cutting product or have offices. So you really have to look at the individual requirements in each room to determine room proportions and room volume.
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty cool. And then I guess kind of back to you, Clinton, you know, in these rooms, where do you guys see the most kind of, I guess, shocking data? Like where, you know, we assume everything's operating and sometimes we'll look at the sensors and it looks like the room is doing just fine. But like when we get in there and scan things, we find out quite a bit of information about that climate. In your opinion, what's kind of the biggest piece of data that kind of shocked you guys, or that you think has the biggest impact on overall yields in cultivations?
Yeah, a few things. I mean, thinking about multi-tier racks, obviously sizing a facility right. Typically, from the data we've seen, doing 2 tiers to 3 tiers is kind of the sweet spot. You go over 4 or 5, you start to get really low yields as you get taller in those facilities. What I will say is most people will instinctually say, yeah, there's probably going to be a slight temperature gradient as I go up from a lower tier to a middle tier to an upper tier. But I think people don't realize even in the length of a room, there can be temperature swings from 5 to 10 degrees, as well as CO2. CO2 is something I think we all take for granted, that we just pump it into the room and we go, but how it's dispersed is extremely important. The other big thing I would say that is I've seen in my studies has just been the human error component cannot be underestimated. I have horror stories from other facilities where things such as irrigation checks weren't done, and we thought water was going to plants, and you see an entire room be lost to the tune of 500K plus, or an employee doesn't show up to do their job on the weekend and now all the plants are brown. So that seems really easy and solvable by human con ops. But as these grows get larger, or depending on the size of your facility, having eyes on the plant when you're in the facility as well as remotely from your computer becomes extremely important, that you have eyes on and you have an alerting system in place if anything from environmentals to plant stress is out of line. You want to be able to detect that early and do prevention.
Awesome. Great insight, guys. So next, let's talk about something that's often overlooked or considered a little bit late in the process in a lot of the projects that we've seen and come into. And that's really branding and kind of a go-to-market strategy. And with restrictions on how cannabis businesses can market themselves, it's not just about being creative, it's also about being strategic and compliant from day one. So Michael, could you tell us, um, how Minnesota operators can begin building brand identity before they even open their doors?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Corey. And just like you mentioned, I think a lot of people are busy, getting the fundamentals of their business dialed in, getting licenses, all that stuff. And sometimes marketing can be overlooked. Especially in a new market, though, capturing early market share is really important, not only from a revenue standpoint, but from a longevity standpoint too. Oftentimes, a lot of people who focus on branding, who focus on having a strong connection to their target audience and connection to kind of the different goals associated with that target audience can really stay in the market and outpace other people who aren't quite focusing on that, especially when it becomes competitive and people start to ultimately sell a lot of the similar products that people have choices to choose from. The faster you can build that brand presence, the better. So focusing on clearly defining your brand voice, values, and positioning from the start is really important. Also, getting your digital presence set up is really important too. People are searching for legal cannabis right now. They have been since it's been announced and legalized in Minnesota. So just because businesses aren't quite ready to open their doors doesn't mean there isn't demand. So even if you have it coming soon, even if you have just something up as a postmark for people to circle back to, it can make all the difference in terms of early sales, early brand adoption. So having a good website that is fast, accentuates your value proposition and really operates in the way that you want is super important. And I would say too, building a website right from the start, as opposed to, taking shortcuts is always a better way to do it. So you don't have to have headaches down the road. Also getting your social media off to a good start, getting dialed in with your brand feel, your brand look, all these things can be done before you open doors. So really important aspect that sometimes people just don't quite dial in until they're busy with other things, and then continues to get pushed down. So taking advantage of it early is always important.
Yeah, and I would think, kind of that forethought, similar to designing a facility, it's, the expansion plan of a brand and how, where you want to go with it, where you need to be to have your foundation, but also kind of looking forward over the next 2 to 3 years. Um, Specifically from a retail standpoint, what are some of the marketing strategies that you've seen that have proven effective in some of the new markets?
Yeah, great question. So again, differentiating yourselves from people who just have a brick and mortar presence to people who are actually able to capture people looking and asking questions online is really huge. There are a lot of obviously advertising restrictions as well. Getting people to your site organically can be a great way to bridge that gap. If you have a stream of people who come to your site because they know your brand, or because you're visible in different queries that they search, you can really get around a lot of advertising limitations and reach a wider audience. So, from the get-go, investing in SEO is really important, making sure that you show up for different queries pertaining to Minnesota's cannabis market, making sure you show up for the products and services that you offer to those consumers is really important. Again, having a website that people come to directly and building a brand up, also really important. So couple ways you can accomplish that are through educational content marketing, also community engagement. So not only on your website and your brand building, obviously there's a really great kind of aspect of community building we can leverage with social media. Social media with cannabis, as some of you may know, is very, very restrictive. So I like to think of social as the extended arm of a website or, kind of a larger digital marketing presence. The other thing, really to just build awareness, you can do some targeted lead generation through SEO. So if you're looking to capture a certain amount of or a certain type of consumer looking for a specific type of product, generate content around that. Become the leader in the space on those different topics. Obviously, at Higher Yields, there are a lot of different opportunities to explore some of those brand building campaigns, and there are ways that you can get help along the way to get there. But just being genuine, telling your brand story, and leaning into just online visibility, digital market share capture. Those are all things so that when new people are coming to the market, whether it be tourists, people in Minnesota who are looking to get into the industry, or those connoisseur type people who already are very familiar with cannabis and just looking for different products, brands, services, showing up online for those queries is really important. And in terms of effective strategies for new markets, that's really the best thing you can do from a digital standpoint is not only establish your market share in the physical presence of Minnesota, but establish it online. Start to be a thought leader, start to build your brand and build credibility with Google and the rest of the search engines.
Awesome. Yeah, and it's interesting. You and I have talked to a lot of cultivators over the years, and new ones coming to market, and oftentimes we'll ask them, what differentiates you, and their answer is we're just the best, which seems like kind of a common mistake, that we see, that people are just going to assume that they could put it in a Ziploc bag and it's going to be just as good as a well-branded product that's sold at a store. But aside from differentiation, what are some other kind of common branding mistakes that you see cannabis startups making that new Minnesota operators could potentially avoid?
Yeah, I think there are, a good amount of things that people kind of overlook. Again, I mentioned this briefly, but one would be to, take shortcuts in your digital presence. I think fully investing in going the distance to make sure that, when people search your brand, they find the best representation. Oftentimes we only have one chance on an initial impression for somebody to really go after a brand or product. And especially if there are competitors that are doing a better job, you really want to stand out. So I think really leaning into, again, those branding essentials and defining what, what you believe in and what your brand stands for are super important. And also just avoiding, some of the pitfalls that people spend a lot of time on. Sometimes people really try to build up, a social presence where they're kind of skirting the rules and they, showcase products and pricing and different things that are kind of in the gray area. And then they get their, pages taken down, and then you've invested all that time for really nothing, and you have to build it back up. It's not to say there isn't risk of that happening through a natural strategy as well, but I would say, especially when you look at really established markets like Colorado, the brands that really put in the work to establish themselves are the ones that are still around after all these years. A lot of brands really put in, minimal effort and minimal, drive to bring people to their business outside of word of mouth. And after kind of the hype of new legalization wears off, you really need those types of avenues to sustain revenue, to sustain relevance, really. So making sure that once, everybody who is really interested in cannabis and all the hype of a new market dies down, that you're still on the top is really important. The one other thing I want to mention too that, people really don't lean into as much is authentic Google reviews. Google reviews and any sort of customer feedback are really imperative to local SEO and showing up in things like the map pack. However, Google really wants it to be an authentic experience. So a lot of businesses will offer, incentives for reviews, and it's a similar situation to taking shortcuts with social media. If Google catches on that those reviews aren't authentic, they can blacklist your listing and you won't show up in the map pack. So again, trying to take an ethical approach and really having brand integrity from those components is really important and impactful.
Great. All right, so moving into compliance and operational documentation, this is definitely an area that can make or break a facility's long-term success. And for a lot of new operators, SOPs are treated like a checkbox during the application process, but in reality, they need to be the living documents that guide day-to-day operations and hold up under scrutiny. And for us, there's kind of two sides of this. There's the compliance side and the regulations, but there's also kind of the internal governance. This is how you make your secret sauce. This is the step-by-step of how you do all the processes to meet the quality assurance that you guys have in place as you're getting going. So it's important that there's communication both between the compliance side of the house as well as the operations side to make sure that they're working together to make sure that we're staying compliant. We also have the most efficient process in place to get us the greatest outcome that we're seeking. And so Walker, one of the questions I have for you is what are the foundational compliance documents that every cannabis operator is going to need in place before they open?
Yeah, certainly. So obviously, you just mentioned kind of the cornerstone of strong compliance is in daily operations is SOPs, right? So first and foremost, with your SOPs, it's real important to understand that the SOPs need to be specific to the market you're in, both the state market as well as any local ordinances that might be in place in terms of rules and regulations of daily operations. But with that also comes some items that get overlooked is an internal checklist, logs, access logs, waste management type stuff. All these things are super essential in terms of remaining compliant and being able to provide that documentation to the state or the agency in terms of working with the OCM on any audits or any things like that. It's real important to, from a general perspective, we can talk about SOPs for the sake of the staff understanding what to do within the facility. But there are real important aspects in terms of compliance that come along with that, right? So we're talking about understanding the specific requirements from the OCM and, again, local ordinances that might be in place. For instance, any cultivator working in the state of Minnesota has to provide a fully detailed cultivation plan. And there's a list of specific requirements that they want to talk about in terms of diagrams, layouts, the square footage and designated space for cultivation and production, Obviously, they have a lot of emphasis on waste management, wastewater, recycling, inputs, things of that nature. And of course, your security plans are super essential as well. And again, a lot of this stuff kind of starts at the application level. So it's real imperative that once you start to move to kick off operations and working within the facility, that you closely align to what you provide in the application and continue to build out what your kind of daily processes, protocols, procedures are going to look like within the facility itself. Again, fully understanding what comes in terms of requirements and restrictions by the state, daily inputs, list of additives and nutrients and stuff that need to be updated in metric access, as well as a firm understanding of metric itself. So again, a lot of these things come back to SOPs and operational documents, checklists, and all these things, of course, can be properly managed by ongoing updates from either somebody in a compliance officer or admin type position that stays updated with OCM regulatory updates and changes, and things of that nature. So having good audit processes, internal reviews and checkpoints, version control, things like that, all that kind of circles back around to making sure that you're kind of founding or following a strong foundational direction with clear direction on what your daily operations need to be in terms of compliance itself.
Yeah, and you hit on a big one. I think version control. As the state rolls out, what we've seen in other states is that regulations they generally get more strict, right? There's more that comes out. There's updates that happen. So, how do you recommend, or what are some strategies that operators can use to help compliance documentation updates and maintaining that version control, and conducting those document audits?
Absolutely. So first and foremost, I think what's often overlooked and so simple is just being subscribed to the OCM and receiving kind of updates from the OCM whenever they'll put out notifications and public comment sections for any time they're about to amend the rules and regulations or make necessary changes and adjustments. So just again, having somebody mindful of these type of changes and being able to manage that process of receiving information and then planning on how to properly adjust any of the documents that you have. We mentioned before, again, internal audits of your operational documents, working with version control. So just as important as any other kind of daily operation or procedure within the facility is having a strong SOP in place for working with SOPs, right? That kind of starts with a master track list of a list of all the SOPs that you might have in-house. Of course, also having a section for adding new SOPs as they come to light or you expand operations. But having kind of a tiered structure of management where people identify who are working on certain SOPs, who's responsible for them, who's approving said SOPs in terms of the edits and updates, as well as kind of marking the process of the dates that they were last or recently updated, as well as certain checkpoints throughout the year where you kind of go back to revisit those. So those documents, those SOPs, and of course, just having a multiple interaction with the management staff to make sure that everybody understands that there's new SOPs that have been created, they've been approved, and now we're going to go ahead and put together kind of a strategy for making sure that we take the time to visit with those updates and implement new training, training logs, sign-offs, things of that nature.
Got it. And I hit on it a little bit, but what are how do new operators kind of find that balance between making sure they've hit the compliance requirements, but also that they're actually supporting day-to-day operational efficiency?
Yeah, definitely. One of the main things that kind of I start with new operators in the space and even people that come to us in terms of kind of overhauling and updating their programs as current operators is we are first and foremost in a compliance industry, right? So we need to treat it as such. Like we're here to grow cannabis and high quality product and marketing, things of that nature, but without compliance we're kind of dead in the water. So having said that, these type of things can get lost. Our daily operations kind of take over, right? We're very focused on our immediate needs within the facility, solving problems, thinking quickly, and kind of addressing, putting out fires, if you may, throughout the day. So being able to update and have clear processes and designated people to focus on the SOP side of things, to be able to communicate and have strong communication with the rest of the team to address certain things that are not working. I think again, it's important to keep SOPs pretty simple. There's no need to over exaggerate things or add complexity to pretty straightforward processes that we want to capture on paper. You know, flow charts and different diagrams and things that help visually for the daily operations that kind of go hand in hand. Understanding that stuff, but then really making sure that the people leading your team are very focused on the job within the facility on a daily basis, learning to take what we learn in the SOPs and what we're working with and be able to kind of put that into action with the team every day. As we work through those things too, we might find, you know, these SOPs were great on paper, but as we get in and we start working, we're finding a lot of new, better, more streamlined ways to process and work through different methodologies or different tasks throughout our day. So let's make note of that. Let's talk with the team. Let's go back and let's revisit and make these updates as necessary.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of that over the years, you and I in the industry, and just new regulations. While they sometimes look really good in theory, in practice, not so much. And same thing as you're developing SOPs off those regulations. So cool. I appreciate the input there.
Certainly.
So now our last topic before we move towards the end here, we want to bring in a real world perspective from someone who's been through the process in Minnesota, launching in a new market. You know, comes with plenty of opportunities, but also its fair share of challenges. So Eric, could you just give us a little bit of you know, kind of what you guys are doing at Lake Leaf, you know, what the facility is, what kind of products you guys are going to be starting with, and just kind of where you guys are in the process and any hard lessons learned, you know, along the way.
Yeah, certainly. So we've been in operation since September of 2024. We have a 50,000 square foot facility up here on the Mille Lacs Reservation, about 2 hours north of the Twin Cities. And so within that building, we're vertically set up to be vertically integrated. So we have cultivation, manufacturing, extraction, packing. Even right now, I'm currently sitting in a future space for a testing lab. So through that early process, we went and identified a lot of the areas that we want to focus on, what kind of products we want to bring to market. And we really looked at, you know, data from other markets. What is common? We know that flower is king, pre-rolls, edibles, vapes. Those are going to be our initial launches with our product lines, but we'll keep open phases for additional products down the line too, as the market demands kind of show us what the people of Minnesota want to see on those shelves. So we're taking that kind of approach to look at data, be informed what people want as we make these types of decisions. Early on, one of the things I think was really important for us to look at was our financial planning and modeling and trying to understand where the Minnesota market was going to be, not initially when it launched, but also where it's going to be 3-5 years down the line. When we do start to see more operators out there, we see price compression. And so it really is moving toward that kind of Toyota Kaizen model of creating continuous improvement, finding those efficiencies through SOP refinement, development to make sure that things are tightened up so you can survive as more and more competition comes out in the Minnesota market. So those are, I think, some of the big things that we learned early on that we were doing in our pre-planning that kind of really guided a lot of the decisions that we're even making today within the facility.
Great. And then, I mean, you guys have a pretty substantial footprint out there. So moving forward, how do you guys, or what does scaling look like for you guys as far as either retail expansion, facility size, product lines? What's the future kind of hold if you guys are successful here in this first year of the new market?
Yeah, I think for us, you know, continuing to develop those product lines, more strains that the market wants to see out there on shelves. Again, we'll look to develop those, bring in those different phenotypes, different types of product offerings. Right now, we're just selling out there packaged Ace and 4 grams. So we got Fat Ace out there, but you know, we'll continue to look at different bag sizing options. We're going to be launching with like live resin, but we're going to do some distillate vapes as well. We'll launch with distillate edibles, but want to do a live resin version as well as we kind of formulate how to match a live resin flavor to a edible flavor and some of that more R&D and refinement and what that's going to taste like. down the road. So those are some of the things that we're looking at from a product perspective. We do have an eye towards retail, certainly as operators of cultivation, looking at wholesale opportunities, how to supply others, but also fulfilling our own stores and kind of controlling that. So we'll be having 3 on-reservation dispensaries opening, some here very shortly in coming weeks, and then some a little bit later planned out too. But that is kind of one of the key things we're looking at. And then eyes towards the future, what the state market holds for us as well. So those kind of on the horizon, those are some of the key things that we're looking at to scale out, in addition to an outdoor grow. We weren't able to get it done this year, but we know that could be a great way to create a lot of biomass for fulfillment orders, different things like that. So that's something that we'll look to do in the next year. One thing that's really great about being tribally owned is we do not have to abide by the state canopy restrictions. Under our own band's regulations, we don't have any, so we can scale up and use economies of scale with things like an outdoor grow and really tackle a project like that with the long-term idea to really scale it up over time.
Yeah, and we've been out there kind of working with your team for the last 3 years when it was really just kind of a conceptual idea. And we worked through some of the strategic planning, and we were working specifically on some of the advantages that the Mille Lacs Band has being on sovereign land. Can you kind of talk a little bit about what some of those advantages are and how you guys are positioning yourself to capitalize on those?
Yeah, I think one of the main advantages for us is we don't have any canopy restrictions under our band regulations. So again, we can go beyond 2 acres for an outdoor grow. We can go beyond 25,000, 30,000 square feet for our indoor canopy. There really is no limit for us. So the sky truly is the limit, but it is something that we want to look at too with pricing and how the market is going to roll out. What is the appropriate time to do these things and what types of investments do we want to make? And so there's also, we pay no federal taxation. So, 280E isn't a thing that we've ever had to worry about because we don't pay federal excise tax, federal corporate income tax and things of these nature. So we do have that ability to put that into our financial models and use that as an advantage for us. Again, that also means that we don't have to pass on those taxes to our consumers at the retail front. So when you come to a dispensary, a Lake Leaf dispensary on the Mille Lacs Reservation, you'll save at least 15% from what is currently in the state taxation scheme just by coming into our store. So we can use that to have lower prices on our products. We can pay our employees more. There's a lot of wiggle room that we can use to our advantage to make a better working environment, hire more people who are good workers, or offer a better price at the register.
Got it. Yeah, and I would say something that we've learned in new markets, and it's very relevant to Minnesota is building that initial team from scratch. Because in some of the new markets, there's not as much experience as there is in a more mature market like a Colorado or California. And having a good culture, similar to branding, similar to energy efficiency, these are all like things that I've seen over the years that have made good organizations great. And my experience with Mille Lacs has been that it has been a really great culture, and it's been a really cool experience, especially to kind of see new leadership being developed and really rising to the occasion to be able to operate a facility of that size. Can you talk a little bit about kind of what it was like building that team and some of the bumps in the road as new leaders are being developed and new cultures are being developed?
Yeah, certainly. And to even go back a little bit, we're Lake Leaf Cultivation. We're owned by Mille Lacs Corporate Ventures, which is essentially the economic development arm of the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe. So for our tribe, we don't have a tax base. So for any governmental services we provide, whether it's healthcare, higher education, early childhood education, language preservation, culture preservation, it has to come from the income that we earn from our different businesses. So that's why when we saw cannabis as an opportunity, we really took a strategic look at it as to how can it benefit our people, what are the advantages, and can we be successful in it? So we really leaned into our experiences coming from the gaming world. I come from higher education, renewable energy. We have people who worked in government contracting. So coming in from highly regulated industries, we had this idea that going into cannabis, we can have a chance at success because we're used to navigating regulations, strict compliance, and building a team that that is thinking that way, I think from the ground up, put us in a really good position to be ready for the different challenges as you have to learn metric, as you have to go through operations, then understand how you move plants through your facility with SOPs so that you are staying compliant, keeping people safe. There's a lot of things to think about that we had the experience kind of built into our team, and I found it to be, really, really important as we've gotten off the ground. And that's also one of the other things that our tribe is kind of, or Mille Lacs Corporate Ventures is chartered with, is to develop leaders, find those new leaders, because as a tribe, we have to grow them from within. So giving these opportunities to grow new businesses and take these challenges and opportunities on, something that we feel really is beneficial. So we have 54 people working for us now. About 60% of them are Mille Lacs band members, and 85% hit some preference category as well. So that's either a spouse, you're a direct descendant, or you're another American Indian tribe. So we have a lot of pride here in our facility and what we do, what we want to produce, and so we really lean into that with the team and lean into our traditional values to create a great culture and to, make people happy at work and put that pride in to produce a really, really great product.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, congratulations on the success and good luck in this early phase of the new market.
Thanks, Corey, and be on the lookout for some of those Lake Leaf products here coming soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Eric. And so now I'll just kind of open it up to each of the teams to just maybe give a kind of a quick overview of what you guys are doing and ways that you may be able to help new operators, and then we'll jump into the Q&A. And if there are any questions, please drop those into the chat now. But I'll start. Eric, I don't know if there's anything else you want to say, but give you one more second here. Are you good?
No, I'm good. I think, I would just say my advice for new operators is, build that knowledge network, lean on some others with experience, because in cannabis, it's a hard industry. You're going to take some bumps along the way, but it's always good to learn from others who have already taken those bumps and really have a good, network of fellow professionals out there that you can lean on, because questions are going to come up. It's still somewhat of a newer industry here in the States. And so it's really good to build that network and find those that you can lean on.
Cool. Yeah, if anybody's looking for prepackaged flower, vapes, or edibles, they can reach out to you, right?
That's correct.
Awesome. Quentin, Bud Scout?
Yeah, again, Bud Scout is Minnesota based. We're actually in the Eastern Metro and Lake Elmo, Minnesota. So we're very excited to be servicing our home state in the cannabis market. For those operators, regardless of the size of your operation, if you're interested in data, interested in learning from it, and having full control of your operation to really understand what is happening, please reach out to us. You can contact us at budscout.ai on the web. Thank you, Corey, and thank you for all the other participants here in the Higher Yields Network for this call today. It's been great.
Awesome. Thanks, Quentin. Sunny, Summit Pay? Oh, I'm sorry, Herring Bank?
Yes. So I think that just one of the things that I would really encourage people to do is when they're searching for the right banking relationship, just make certain that bank has the experience they need, asking questions like how long they've been in the industry, what is their long-term plan, who runs their program, what is their experience, are they doing their own compliance, or are they outsourcing that, are all good questions. Do they charge percentages on your deposits, application fees, things like that. And then, Herring, we've got a very large number of direct deposit accounts nationwide. As long as it's legal by the state, we'll bank it. So direct deposit accounts, lending, we've got our merchant processing coming out. We have strong relationships with couriers in the area as well. Another thing that we're bringing to our customers is the ability to use smart safes where they can make their deposit directly into the safe. And, when they deposit that money in, that will count as a deposit on their end. So I think we've got a lot of really great products that are just on the cusp of coming out, along with our all the other products that we've had for our legacy products that we've had since 2012 in the cannabis space.
Awesome. Thanks, Sammy. And then
Thank you.
Riley, Summit Yep. Riley,
Yeah.
SummitPay.
Yeah, I would say don't take shortcuts on pushing off digital payments and your collections platforms till later on, but go ahead and get those in place now for yourself and for your customers to have a good routine on how you're going to get your funds before your account receivables get too bad. We're happy to be that provider for you. We do it in a compliant way, one of the handful in the nation that can do it in an open loop fashion, right? Don't shortcut by going with a wallet or anyone who might not be in the full light of compliance and regulations, but someone who has that all in place.
Great. Thank you, Riley. And Scott, G3 Architecture.
Yeah, I think we could really be helpful from the due diligence perspective, Corey. Site selection and starting to think about how to build a project is a pretty complex endeavor. We're happy to provide the experience we've had helping other customers put some plans together and knowing what they have to get into at the beginning rather than sort of learning along the way. It's a long and complex process, and we're happy to help. So thank you for putting this together, Corey.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and just on the higher yield side, anyone looking for support in bringing these projects together and really understanding the complexity of them to be able to manage these things properly and hit critical timelines, to hit budgets, and to make sure that you make it to market in time and you avoid as many mistakes as possible. We are very well versed and very experienced in the regulatory space, the design build space, as well as the operational launch space. And have been doing so for over 10 years now. And lastly, our Complia tool is our HYC regulatory auditing system that allows for remote and on-site compliance audits that automate detailed reports at the end showing areas of non-compliance and 15 different regulatory categories, as well as the severity of each of those issues. So whether you're looking to go big and do a large facility and be vertically integrated, or maybe you're just looking at one retail store, no project too small, no project too big for us. So look forward to hearing any questions that anyone here may have today. All right. Well, no questions for today. If you have any questions that do come up or you need any support, you can reach out to us at higheryieldsconsulting.com. There is a contact form on the website that you can fill out. You can also reach out directly to Taylor, who's our account manager. It's just Taylor at higheryieldsconsulting.com. And her phone number is 720-655-0743. You can also call the 1-800 number 844-HIGH-YIELD if you'd like to reach out to us. And if there are any follow-up questions, please be sure to reach out. And we wish everyone good luck as they enter this new market. Have a good one, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.